Good afternoon. We'll call to order the regular meeting of the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for November 21, 2011. The first item on our agenda is consideration of the of the minutes for the regular meeting on October 26, 2011. Those minutes were included with our agenda materials. Are there any questions, or any revisions to those minutes? If not, they'll stand approved and as presented, and we will move on. We do have one item under old business. It is a weeds and grass exemption request. This was application W11056 by Mr. Jim Wood for the Saratoga Park Homeowners Association. They are requesting a partial exemption from the weeds and grass ordinance on property located south and west of the Forest Point and Saratoga Park subdivisions. It is requested that a portion of the property return to a natural state or as a wilderness area. Mr. Blum, if you would review that one again for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then Mr. Cantrell, representing the Saratoga Park Homeowners Association, is going to try to respond to some of the questions that you all had at our last meeting. If you'll recall, this was the first of our weeds and grass exemption requests. This is a new ordinance that was adopted this past summer that enables landowners who want to be exempted from the city's the city code as it pertains to the upkeep of weeds and grass to make application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for an exemption. At the last meeting, the Saratoga Park Homeowners Association made a request for a portion of their common area that is directly adjacent to the Forest Point subdivision. And at that meeting, the board deferred action. We held a public hearing at that meeting. A number of residents from the Forest Point subdivision provided input, and there were still some outstanding issues that the board wanted additional information on. Particularly the existence of wetlands and the ability of the property owner, the Saratoga Park Homeowners Association, to be able to access the requested portion of their property. And with that being said, I'll hand the floor over to Mr. Cantrell, who is going to make a brief presentation on some materials that he sent you. You all received this via courier last week. This is about a 19 or 20 page handout regarding, or beginning with a memo and then with some additional information that he is going to go over. And then after Mr. Cantrell gets done with his presentation, Mr. Ives is going to have a few comments as well. And I will bring to your attention that in addition to Mr. Cantrell's supplemental information that he provided last week, Mr. Ives also prepared a memo that was sent to you late last week, and I'll also put another copy on your desks. And Mr. Sam Huddleston, our city environmental engineer, also drafted a memo today regarding this request, and that is on your tables as well. And with that being said, I'll hand the podium over to Mr. Cantrell to present to the board.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Didn't really come prepared today to make a presentation as such. I've given you some information regarding our access to it and how limited it is, and just we can't get equipment via our common area through there. I looked at it from different locations within our property to try and traverse through there, and it's we'd be going almost a half a mile to get to the subject property and attempt to try and cut that area. And also I included some additional information about EPA's criteria for establishing property as wetlands. And at the presentation I made before, I was referring to elevations, and I think the information I gave to you from the EPA would give some clarification to how come that elevation is important. And you've got two types of wetlands that could exist in there, and one's the depressant and one's the riverine. And we just couldn't afford to employ a geotechnical firm to come out there and do that. But it is our feeling that it would be classified that way. The pictures that you see in there, I went out onto the property. I came onto the property through the Bellwood Baptist Church property, and I stood back behind the homes that are at the end of Forest Point Drive, and was standing pretty much in the center of that property, taking pictures back towards the subdivision. And then, of course, I took pictures back towards the creek. You can see the standing body of water that is in there. I noted the vegetation in there with the darkened trunks and how that is. One of the first things is my experience as being a developer is when I see those darkened trunks in a low-lying area, that's clue one for me to say we're in a wetlands area. And if you go around town where there are known wetlands, like down Middle Tennessee Boulevard, used to be Sanborn Drive, when that was widened, you got the wooded wetlands through there and the darkened trunks on those trees through there. There's some over on Robert Rose Drive, the new road that went in recently back behind Golf Cart USA or Golf USA, whatever it's called. You can see some of that sort of same characteristic. Also, if you're familiar with the Bellwood Baptist Church property, you know that area up against the creek or up against Kennard's Animal Hospital over there. If you've ever had a child play sports over there, you know that ground is just saturated all the time. Of course, that same stream of soil runs all the way back through to our subdivision where, today there'll be crawfish holes all through that property, most likely. Of course, we have the natural habitat through there, which everyone knows about. I mean, beavers love wetlands, and that's why they came in there and built the dam. So that's where they reside. There's blue heron in there. There are turtles and a lot of wildlife in the area. I don't have much more to tell you other than if you've got some questions about the report.
Mr. Cantrell, I do have one question regarding the access, and I'd have to look back at the minutes, but I think that if my memory serves me correctly, it was either 2005 or 2007 when the last time some of these homeowners in Forest Point indicated that that area was mowed or cut or bush hogged, whatever term you want to use. Do you feel like that at that point in time they were accessing this area because there was empty lots in Forest Point and they just went through those empty lots to get to this? Or what's changed between that point and now that there's not easy access, I guess is the best way to say it?
I think they were going through other people's property to get there, and that's what I was told by, I can't remember Steve's last name, that was on the board at that time, and he stopped me the other day and said, Rick, we were going through properties in the Forest Point subdivision to get there.
Whether you had permission, I mean...
I do not have firsthand or even secondhand knowledge of
Right.
that. I'm sorry, Mr. Halliburton.
Right.
I just don't. But I looked at our walking bridge, and immediately you've got to go up over the curb, and you've got to cross a couple of drainage swales that are concrete lined. They're narrow, and then there's just a steep slope like that where you couldn't get a piece of equipment, commercial grade, or you probably couldn't get a push mower across without than pushing it like that.
Yeah.
And then some of the terrain, when you get back in there, it's kind of hard to define behind the ends of some of the lots. And I tried to do a good job of that on the pictures I gave you, saying where the banks are. And you can see that, though, by the topo information that I gave you. It's fairly steep back in there. It's kind of hard to discern where the actual property line is in the field there. And, it's 1.5 to 1 slope. I mean, it's something you'd have to do with a weed eater.
Right.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. But I'm not sure if I'd be cutting Saratoga property or if I'm cutting resident A, B, or C property.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just don't know. I know when I was on the board, there was a vacant lot, and we did go off through a vacant lot. The topo information I gave you was dated 2001, and that was prepared by SEC, and it was done in regards to a letter of map revision after it was filled to have the property removed from the floodplain and necessary flood insurance.
The suggested resolution that you outlined in the letter that you delivered to us, am I right in reading that just to say that I mean, essentially you want the application granted, the board consider allowing the area between Lytle Creek and the cul-de-sacs of Forest Point, Nathan Court, and Boone Court continue a transition to woodlands. The balance of the area that is currently being maintained by others be continued as is. I assume you mean be maintained by the Forest Point homeowners.
Yes, sir. And those residents are on Forest Point Drive, and in a portion of them are on, I think it's Nathan Court. And in some instances, it looks like maybe the fences are a little bit past the property line, which is no problem. There was a gentleman who spoke at the meeting before who said he cuts about 60 feet or so back behind his house, and the Saratoga Park residents, I don't think will ever have a issue with them enjoying that extended backyard, that they would appreciate. The one fellow said he cuts it because he wanted it cut at the same time as his yard, and we just couldn't cut it that often. And I was just trying to let you know there is a position that we would compromise on instead of just letting it overgrow all the way, because in those locations there still is, in some areas, sufficient distance off the stream to protect the stream banks. It goes back pretty far in that area.
And I guess that's what I'm curious, is the position, the compromise that you're willing to let Forest Point homeowners continue to maintain those portions that they do or want to maintain, I guess.
It's certainly fine with us.
Okay.
I know it's a difficult thing to describe without standing there and looking, but I think some of you have had the opportunity to look at the property from different locations. I'd included some photos because of what I had to go through to get to the property, and so I just went through the Bellwood Baptist Church, and it's really thick in that area that the homes back up to, and provides a nice buffer actually for the church and the residents, but it's thick and it's deep in some locations.
Chairman Rogers, and he did allude to some photographs that he brought. Would it might be beneficial for the board if he would go over those photographs and tell y'all what he's trying to depict in these photographs? Would that be something that y'all would be interested in?
Okay. I mean, we can move through those pretty quickly. I think we've all seen them, but if you want to just put them up on the overhead there, you can go through it quickly.
I don't know which way. Okay. Well, these two photos are pretty much standing in the center of the open area. I think the house that you see in the top photo is a house at the end of Forest Point Drive there, and you can see the fence and see the grasses. And then this one's pretty much at the same location, the bottom one there. And any questions on where that position might be? It's not too far into the property from the Bellwood Baptist Church property.
And you're indicating the bank area as what?
Steep.
I'm sorry?
It's fairly steep.
Okay.
And somewhere in there is the property line.
Right.
It could be at the fence or it could be below the fence. I'm just not sure. And if you look at the ground cover there, you see how sparse it is. And then this photo, I think that those homes may be along Nathan Court that you're looking into the back of there. best I remember. And you can see the trees as I'm standing back in the middle of it with the darkened trunks. Then obviously I've moved a little bit further back onto our property towards Lytle Creek. In this photo, there again, it's not real thick at this point, but it is starting to reestablish. And the darkened trunks over to the right-hand side. And pretty much the same thing here. There's a bank through there, a bank through there. To the left is looking back towards, on this photo, this area in here is back towards the Bellwood Baptist Church property. This is pretty much standing in the same location, but looking back towards the creek. And you may recall in the old photos or aerial mapping that you had last time, there was a body of water. It was setting there as a borrow area, and there you can see it setting there. And then this is the woods that you see as you face towards the creek. Again, the undergrowth is minimal, and the trees are the same. There's a darkened trunk on the trees. There's your photos there. This is standing on the Bellwood Baptist Church property, looking back toward the home. Same photo. This photo, those trees appear to be the property line between Forest Point and Bellwood Baptist. Because it's got a lot of thick growth on it. To the left would be the Bellwood Baptist side, Forest Point side. Let's see if I can find the... This is the topo that I got from SEC. This would be the Bellwood Baptist Church property over here. And at the end of Forest Point, most of the pictures were taken about that distance off that map, looking back this way. Let's see. This photo, this is an aerial map. It's, how do I scale out? Zoom. Yeah, zoom in. There you go. Thank you. I was here's that body of water that I was looking into. So there's the Bellwood Baptist Church property, and I was probably standing somewhere right in here, kind of just moving around, taking some photos. Beginning over here is where people that live in Forest Point have been cutting the property back some distance around through here. And then that darkened line is the creek itself as it comes around and then goes up and goes underneath Middle Tennessee Boulevard. My access point is way back up this way, this common area. The second ditch I referred to, I think it is in this area right here. Here's the dividing line between the two subdivisions. And that first ditch, like I say, I wasn't able to get a good picture of it, or I would have brought something, but still, it doesn't do it justice because you can't see the elevation changes through there. But by being a concrete line, it kind of goes straight down like that. Narrow at the bottom, it's just not maneuverable. Is that it?
Any
Some
other
more
questions,
information?
Mr. Cantrell? All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Matthew. All right, Matthew, anything else we need to consider on this application? I know there's some other information from the about the issue of fire codes, and I think Mr. Ives had authored an opinion on that.
Yes, sir, Chairman Rogers. I think Mr. Ives would like to go over the memo that was distributed to y'all.
Okay.
And I'm not going to read this. I will be brief. did intend to get it to you so y'all could look at it ahead of time. I'm sure you have. But the point would be that the provisions that were brought up during the prior meeting are part of some standards that have been promulgated by the National Fire Protection Association. These standards are intended to address areas where there has been a determination that there's a wildland-urban interface that creates a fire hazard. That determination has not been made here as defined in this section of those standards. They would apply when a local government determines that topographical features, vegetation fuel types, local weather conditions, and prevailing winds result in a greater peril for structures becoming involved in a fire than would normally exist. Well, that determination has never been made by anyone for the City of Murfreesboro, and quite frankly, from talking with our staff, I believe that if there was to be a study made, there wouldn't be anywhere in the city where that kind of a determination would be made. We have a number of areas here where, similar to this, there are substantially natural areas not all that far from residences or from businesses. But this standard is not one that is legally binding on the city or on this commission, on this board. Certainly the ideal of fire protection is one that we all share in, and yet our city building codes and zoning ordinance allow houses to be built within 10 feet of each other. And for commercial buildings, you can actually go to the property line. In many cases, you can have commercial buildings that are basically on top of each other. And to allow that but not allow a fence to be close to a somewhat of a wilderness area somehow doesn't seem to be very logical to us. And from the examples that I included, the notes from the other provisions of these standards, it just seems that these are more intended to apply to buildings, to outbuildings, to garages, to apartments, to commercial office buildings. And there's references to the distance from a principal structure to a support structure. And while technically I think you would have to say that a fence could be included within this definition of structure, it does not seem that that's the intent of these standards. The standards say what they say, but it's my opinion, and I think most of staff, other staff joins me, that these aren't meant to be applicable to a situation such as this in Murfreesboro. And I think another factor we have to consider is that fires can, of course, happen anywhere, and there was a report that there was once a fire in this area, and it was addressed immediately. We do have a fire department that's provided us with an ISO 2 rating, and they are minutes away from this property. If anything happens, they can be on top of it immediately. It's a bit unlike being in West Texas or Colorado, where I lived close to a national forest and quite a ways away from any significant firefighting apparatus. So, any questions, I'd be happy to try to respond.
The one thing you note there in number 6 is that the ordinance that provides for the BZA to grant the exemption from the mowing requirements also allows the city to revoke that exemption if the city believes that a fire or other hazard to the health, safety, or welfare of the public has resulted from the exemption. So what would the process be if this exemption is granted and the Forest Point continues to experience problem with wildlife or rodents, snakes, that sort of thing coming onto their property? Do they just go to the city? Do they have to come before the BZA? Or
it does not need to come back before the BZA. The ordinance doesn't require that. The complaints would be made presumably to city staff, building codes, fire department as applicable. And if there's a determination that there is in fact a substantial risk to public safety, be it from fire or from wildlife or from any other factor that's resulting from this, then the city staff, and that would really be, I think, the city manager, could make a determination that there's a risk here and could revoke the exemption and require then that the property owner take appropriate action.
Okay. All right, Matthew, anything else we need to cover?
The only other thing is if you have any questions regarding Mr. Huddleston's memo, he is available at the meeting today if you have any questions for him. If you'd like to take a moment, I know you just received that, if you'd like to take a moment to read that over first.
I was going to ask him a question about that report.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rogers, members of the BZA, Sam Huddleston, City Engineering Department. And I did prepare just a short statement with my support, my professional support of this application as submitted. I'd be glad to answer any questions about that if you have anything specifically.
A couple things I was going to ask. This, I guess the hatched area, I guess the area in question, would all of that area qualify as the water quality protection area?
No, sir. The water quality protection area refers specifically to a 50-foot zone from the top of bank of the creek or a 35-foot zone from the edge of a wetland.
Okay. If the area where, when we went on the walk, I guess going a couple of months back, where it starts growing up, if one of those, if the exemption was granted and one of the property owners wanted to mow in that area that may be closer to what you're talking about, a wetland, is there a problem if a homeowner wanted to maintain some of that area? Is like a
Yes, this property does not enjoy any water quality protection area protections, if I could say it that way. In other words, we don't have the ability to enforce it because it doesn't apply. The water quality protection areas were never a part of their development plan. What I'm trying to say in my memo is that water quality would benefit if we allow the areas adjacent to the stream and adjacent to the wetland to naturally vegetate. But there'd be no enforcement issue with the city if they were maintaining that area.
okay, so an exemption wouldn't preclude somebody from maintaining behind their house if they felt they wanted to.
That's correct. We do have some areas in the city that are protected where, under the ordinance that was passed by City Council in 2005, that it would be a violation of city code to disturb that streamside vegetation. But that's only for newer developments, and it does not apply citywide.
So in your memo, where let's say you recommend approval based on the heavily wooded, the wetlands, and that's basically covering this whole section. You think this whole section would?
Yes, after having considered the points of Mr. I's guidance to the board as we prepared to review these applications, I find when we exclude all the areas that could be excluded, it leaves a very small portion of the property that they would actually have to maintain anyway. And I don't have exact numbers on that,
right,
but certainly it's a very significant portion would already enjoy an exemption by rule.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you. All right, and I think, Matthew, anything else you need to present?
No, sir.
All right, so I think we're ready then to take some action on it. Certainly open the floor for any further discussion as well.
I don't have a motion. I have a comment or two. I'm struggling with this a little bit because, in my mind, we're using wetlands as, to a degree, even though it's not defined or depicted as a wetland, However, I think it's being presented that, you know, if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck, but we're not defining it as a wetland, and we're using that as our means of granting this application. But at the same time, we're saying that because it's not defined as a wetlands, then the homeowner has the opportunity to maintain or cut the area. And it's almost an oxymoron. You know, at one point we're saying we're using it as not the excuse, but the basis of granting the application, and then we're turning around and saying, but it's okay for you to cut that area. That's my struggle here. My main reason when we first heard this, I guess last month, was that when Mr. Honeycutt mentioned that there is a safety hazard here, but now it looks like that we are saying that by definition there is not a safety hazard. And I'd like that confirmed, because that's not what was told to us at the last meeting by a fire department official. So is that we are making that determination today by Mr. Ives' findings that we now do not have a fire hazard?
Based on the meeting that Gary Whitaker and I had with Mr. Honeycutt, and also with our joint review of the document that he had referred to, which is this portion of NFPA Standard 1144, which is the one that talks about this kind of thing. There has not been a determination that there is a safety hazard, a fire hazard, by this, let's say, co-location of a grown-up area and a fence adjacent to it. I don't think anyone would ever say that it is not possible that there could be a fire out there, as it is not possible to say that one of the next-door neighbors' houses can't catch on fire. And certainly fires are possible, and in a dry season, there's going to be something in some of this area that would burn. But it's also not the kind of area that most likely ever, at least in the general weather patterns that we have here, would burn the way the West Texas wildfires burned this summer. Not to say we can't have that kind of a drought here, but I don't think we have in quite some time, and that's certainly not our normal weather patterns.
Right.
So I can't say, I don't think anyone can say that there is no fire hazard, but the flip side of that is there has not been a determination that there is a fire hazard. Now,
I mean, I understand what you're saying.
And also, Mr. Honeycutt had planned on being here today. If there were further questions, he had something else that had been got scheduled on him for this time, but I do believe that the Assistant Fire Marshal is here. He is. I don't want to volunteer him to speak, but if someone has a specific question for him, I'm sure he would try to address it.
I mean, I'm fine with your explanation. I just I kind of want to, based upon your explanation and Mr. Honeycutt's prior comments were kind of my determining factor of what, number one, what a compromise would be in this situation, and then because of the fact that there might be a fire hazard. But I understand where we are today.
And I would say that at least I interpreted Mr. Cantrell's memo, and at least in part, as saying that he appreciated the idea of a compromise for leaving maintaining 30 feet rather than maintaining the whole area. But for him, although there is legal access, he has very practical access problems to get equipment in there to do this. And I think the other thing, I believe the banks that he was referring to on some of those photographs are fairly steep. And they are pretty much right. They start very close to the back of the fence and come down steeply to the level that part of it at least was excavated out to build this subdivision. So you would have some further problems if that area is cut of encouraging erosion on a steep bank. And also what you would cut that with other than maybe by hand in a weed eater. So, you know, and I certainly understand your point about the wetlands, and to some extent it is an anomaly, I guess, to say, well, it's a wetland, so you don't have to cut it. But it's not really a wetland, so if somebody else wants to cut it, they can. But the presence or proximity to wetlands, I think, is just one of the factors that you can look at. And I don't think anyone has tried to say that this entire 10-acre area that they're asking to be exempted is a wetland. And I think it's fairly clear from being out there that it's not. But there are areas of it that I feel from the definitions that have been provided most likely are, and it's a little difficult to maneuver around them, especially to bring in heavier equipment from far away. Whereas I guess a local, the neighbor next door, if they want to cut part of it, they probably won't cut it if it's at a point when it's wet, because they'll have a difficult even getting a lawnmower in it. But if it to take some of it down if they want to would not seem to present a problem at this time, and would still give water quality protection and other natural protections that are part of the other goals that we can look at in this process.
You know, a number of the things that we look at as a board come down to judgment, and I guess judging access and whether it's difficult access, impractical access, no access. I guess trying to find this difficult access, or is that enough to make a decision on, I guess?
Well, again, I would say that's one of the factors. And it's, in this case, it's not necessarily the only factor, but it is a factor.
Well, I remember when we went out, to view the property, I can never think of the lady's, pronounce her name right, Miss Pozibon, that was here, that was so concerned about her house, because it was really heavily weeded there, just right behind her house. And she was real concerned about that. How, and I'm confused, are you saying that you want a partial, but what part are you going to maintain, is what I want to know. Will you cut it to the 30-foot like it's the fire department says we need to do, or will they be responsible for cutting that? Or?
Well, I understand Mr. Cantrell to say that what he's asking for is to not be required to cut any of it. And that I understood him to be saying that if he had better access to get equipment back there, then as a compromise, he'd be more willing to look at the 30-foot as a reasonable compromise, but that to him, at least, that it's not that reasonable of a compromise because he can't get equipment in there to mow the 30 feet any more than he can get equipment in to mow all of it.
So what would she do then? Would she be responsible for cutting some of those weeds out the back of her lot? Or? I
guess I wouldn't use the word responsible. I guess from what they have said, the Saratoga homeowners are not going to object if she chooses to cut some of that. She's not going to be required to cut some of it. Mm-hmm. But if she wants it cut, there wouldn't be anyone else required to do it. So she would, if she wanted it cut, then in that respect, yeah, she'd have to go do it. Or get one of her neighbors to do it if somebody else right there is maintaining part of it. I believe I remember saying that she didn't have a gate in her fence. Mm-hmm. But I think she also said that there was another homeowner there who would give Saratoga permission to go down. Well, they'd probably give her permission also, I suppose, if she wanted to go to trim some of that. Mm-hmm. don't know which homeowner it is, so I can't speak for them, but if they would allow Saratoga to, they probably would allow anyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, based on everything I've heard, I'm going to vote to approve this application. And since we're in a situation that we're in, I'm going to try to be specific about what I've considered and coming to that decision at this point. Looking at Mr. Huddleston's letter, it sort of coincides with some of his bullets with some of my thoughts. Obviously, a large portion of the property is heavily wooded. The portion to the back, I think, probably is a wetlands, even though not technically designated as such. And of course, that's really that's one of the difficulties here, is that the property really transitions as you go back through there. The first part, to your point, Mr. Halliburton, is pretty easily maintained and has been maintained because it's easily maintained. But the part that's harder to be maintained, where that line is, folks haven't been doing it, and I suspect for the reasons that they're asking not to do it, which is because it's going to be difficult to do. And so the portion of this 10 acres encompasses two types, in my mind, of property. One that probably could be fairly easily maintained, assuming access, and the other that even if you had access, you would have some difficulty with. And that goes to bullet 6, I think, in Mr. as well as bullet 4, Mr. Holston's letter. The thing that weighed on me the most the last time, and still does, is this access idea. And I've not learned anything today that would convince me to think. And I think one of the factors that we can and should consider in this grass ordinance is the burden on the property owner to continue to maintain this property, and I think it weighs pretty heavily. In fact, I think it would be an impossibility unless we send somebody in there with a weed eater. In addition to that, having learned, in Mr. Ives' letter, number 1 in his letter talks about the fact that this 30-foot came from a standard that, while advisory has become questionable in staff's opinion about whether or not the city's bound by it. In fact, I think Mr. Ives' opinion is that we're not bound by it. And then I've always had an issue about whether or not a fence was a structure, because we're not talking about right up against somebody's house here. We're talking about fences that are in their backyards. I don't think we ever saw where the growth was going right up to somebody's house. People had privacy fences, and that's where the growth was coming on that back side, back over there where it's more like wetlands. And then I call it a safety valve provision, also gives me some comfort in this. If at some point in the future conditions change, if this condition of property worsens, if a drought hits us, the city does have the ability to come in and revoke this if it feels like a public safety factor is there. So based on all those factors, Mr. Chairman, I'll be voting for approval of this. I'm not sure if anybody's ready for a motion. I guess we're all going around and having our say and putting it on the record, but that's where I'm at on the application.
Unless anyone else wants to comment, I think we are ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion then, Mr. Chairman, that we approve this application for the, I guess, the exemption.
Waiver or exemption.
From the city's grass and weed ordinance, with any staff comments that were originally attached to the application.
I don't believe there were any recommended conditions on that.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Cantrell, Mr. Wood, that application has been approved. Appreciate y'all's patience with this. Also, we do appreciate the residents of Forest Point and their participation in this process and their patience with us as well. All right, we'll now move on to new business. We first, under new business, need to consider a special use permit request It is application Z11064 by Ms. Phyllis Thomas. She is requesting a special use permit in order to conduct a home occupation, which would be a massage therapy, at her residence located at 2314 Crystal Court. And this property is located in a residential single-family RS10 zone. Mr. Baldwin, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Our first public hearing today is for, as you mentioned, a proposed home-based business at 2314 Crystal Court. I'll show you the aerial photo. This is Battleground Drive, just north of West Northfield Boulevard. Crystal Court is a cul-de-sac that comes in just a little bit to the east of Battleground Drive. Ms. Thomas's house is right here. And as you can see, the area is predominantly single-family residential in nature. There are some duplexes several streets away, but it's predominantly single-family residential in nature, and it is zoned RS10, residential single-family. Ms. Thomas currently practices at a commercial location and would like to move her massage therapy business to her home. Here's her site plan. This is a zoomed-in aerial photograph. She has a lot of foliage on her property, so it's a little bit difficult to see, but she does have a one-car width concrete driveway coming in off of Crystal Court. There's her house and a detached garage, and there's actually a small gravel appendage to the south of her detached garage. And all of this area is concrete here. She's got a concrete turnaround area. She parks her personal vehicles, she says, in her detached garage, and will continue to do so if approved for this home-based business. Ms. Thomas has indicated that the clients will visit her house by appointment only, and that she will have no more than 5 appointments per day, averaging between 2 and 5 per day. According to the applicant, she will leave at least 30 minutes of overlap time in between appointments so that there will never be more than 1 client at the residence at a time. Days of operation will be Monday through Friday, and appointments are proposed to begin at 7:30 a.m., and the last client will leave no later than 5:30 p.m. As I mentioned in my staff comments, the subject house was built with an attached garage, and I'll show her floor plan to you right now. Here was the old attached garage as it was originally constructed. Some time ago, that area of the house was converted into living space, and Ms. Thomas would like to utilize a portion of that property or a portion of that part of the house as the area where she will conduct her home-based business. And as you can see, she would have a small waiting area here and a treatment room, and a portion of that former attached garage would be used as a laundry room and storage, which would not count towards her maximum square footage requirements. As you know, home-based businesses can take up no more than 25% of the square footage of the house. According to the property assessor's website, the total area of the house is 1,937 square feet, and the area devoted to the home occupation will be 238 square feet, which is 12.3% of the total area of the house. Ms. Thomas has indicated to staff that she will have no employees. In addition, she is not requesting any signage for her home-based business. The subject lot has a long driveway along the south side of the house, which leads to a wider parking area behind the house that is approximately 34 by 29, according to the applicant. And there's also a detached 2-car garage, and as I mentioned, Ms. Thomas will park her personal vehicles inside the detached garage, leaving the entire concrete area, the driveway, and the parking area available for her clients. With that being said, there is plenty of room for 1 car at a time, 1 client car at a time to park on Ms. Thomas's property without having to park on the street. Now I'll show you some photographs of the property. This is the front of the subject house. This is the concrete driveway leading back to the 2-car garage. This is the two-car garage where she will keep her personal vehicles, and there's a little gravel appendage, as I mentioned, that goes to the south of the garage. Just a photograph of that gravel appendage. This is that 34 by 29 concrete parking area that is located in between the detached garage and the area where she will have her massage therapy office. This is the back side of that former attached garage that she plans to convert into her office, and that's currently a living area right now. This is the side of where her office will be, and that door will remain and will continue to be the entrance for that part of the house, and that's where her clients will enter. And that's on the side of the house. And now just some photographs of the surrounding area. The lot to the south is a pretty wide side yard. As you can see, this is the house to the south and their side yard. This is taken from Ms. Thomas's driveway. This is that house to the south that we just saw a moment ago, which would be the most affected house because it's closest to the actual proposed massage therapy office. And this is its side yard that is adjacent to Ms. Thomas's property. This is the subject property to the north along Crystal Court. And there's a vacant area directly across Crystal Court from Ms. Thomas's house. If the board wishes to approve this application, staff recommends the following conditions. There should be no more than 5 client visits per day, and all visits shall be by appointment only with no overlapping appointments. All appointments shall begin no earlier than 7:30 a.m. and shall end no later than 5:30 p.m. on the days of operation designated. And those are just basically memorializing some of the things that she has volunteered to in her application. Ms. Thomas is in attendance at the meeting to answer any questions that you may have. I'm also available either before or after the public hearing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, thank you. Ms. Thomas, anything you would like to add to the application?
Not that I'm aware of. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, any questions for Ms. Thomas? All right, going to get off light today. Thank you. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed, and we'll open the floor for any further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the application subject to the staff comments.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Ms. Thomas, that application has been approved. Thank you. All right, we'll next consider application S11065 by Mr. Dean Higbee of South Branch Nursery for the preserve at Indian Creek Homeowners Association. They're requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4, 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement on property located along the east side of Fortress Boulevard in the common area of the preserve at Indian Creek subdivision. All right, Ms. Kerr, if you'd review that application for us, please. I think I can say 25 1/4, 24A22 in my sleep now.
It comes pretty easy after a little while. Thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. Signs placed in or over public utility or drainage easements must have the BZA approval, as well as any easement holders which those signs will be placed in. Due to widening of Fortress Road, previous signage at the preserve of Indian Creek was demolished. Therefore, the applicant is requesting permission to erect 2 externally illuminated Development ID freestanding wall signs with 3 square feet of display area and 6 feet overall height along the eastern side of Fortress Boulevard. One will be located on the northeast corner at the intersection of Fortress Boulevard and Indian Creek Boulevard, and one on the northeast corner of Maya Drive. The applicant is also requesting one externally illuminated Development ID freestanding wall sign with 17 square feet display area and 8 feet overall height on the southeast corner of Maya Drive and Fortress Boulevard. All 3 signs will be located within a common area, which has been designated as a public utility and drainage easement. Agreement for a sign in a City of Murfreesboro easement agreement has been assigned by the city engineer, the director of building and codes, Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department, and the Murfreesboro Electric Department. Consolidated Utility District has submitted an approved agreement for a sign installed in a CUD waterline easement. Atmos Energy has submitted a letter stating they have no facilities within the utility easement along Fortress Boulevard at Indian Creek subdivision, and AT&T has submitted an agreement to allow signage within its easement as well. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations, and Mr. Dean Higby, as well as myself, are here today to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? All right, thank you. Mr. Higby, anything you'd like to add to your application?
Good afternoon. As she explained, Ms. Carter, this development, which was had a really nice landscaping and signage before the widening of Fortress Boulevard. Basically, the homeowner associations are trying to get that look back, kind of like it was before. The work has been done on widening the road. The only thing lacking, pretty much getting things back to where it was, is the signage and the landscaping that we've done a plan and submitted as far as trying to get that back to where it was before the widening of the road. So if you have any questions, I don't think that we're going to illuminate the columns, the 3x3. Basically, it's just one sign that we were going to do with low voltage lighting. The columns won't have any lighting on those.
All right, thank you, Mr. Higby. Any questions for Mr. Higby? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to staff comments.
I'll second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Higby, that application has been approved. I think you've got the next one as well. It is application S11066 by Mr. Dean Higby of South Branch Nursery for the Villas at Indian Creek Homeowners Association, again requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance prohibiting a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. This is for property located along the east side of Fortress Boulevard in the common area of the Villas at Indian Creek subdivision. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. As previously stated, any sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement must have BZA approval and the approval of any easement holders. This property is a continuation of the previous property we just discussed. There's 2 different properties. There's the Preserve at Indian Creek, and then there's the Villas of Indian Creek. One is single-family homes and one is townhomes. So this is an extension of that, where the Fortress Road was widened and some of the signage was demolished that they are wishing to replace with the landscaping. And the applicant is requesting permission to erect 5 non-illuminated Development ID freestanding wall signs with 3 square feet display area at 6 feet overall height along the eastern side of Fortress Boulevard. 2 would be located on each corner of the intersection of Fortress Boulevard and Twin Moons Way, and 2 located on each corner at the intersection of Fortress Boulevard and Lone Wolf Run. and one on the southeast corner of Fortress Boulevard and Chippewa Place. All 5 signs will be located within a common area, which is designated as a public utility and drainage easement. The agreement for a sign in a City of Murfreesboro easement has been signed by the city engineer, the Director of Building and Codes, Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department, and the Murfreesboro Electric Department. Consolidated Utility District has submitted approval agreement for signs installed in CUD waterline easement. Atmos Energy has submitted a letter stating they have no facilities within the utility easement along Fortress Boulevard at Indian Creek subdivision, and AT&T has submitted an agreement to allow signage within this easement as well. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations, and again, Mr. Dean Higbee or myself are here to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Questions for Ms. Kerr? All right, thank you. Mr. Higbee, anything you'd like to add to this application? Okay. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Mr. Higbee, that application has been approved as well. We'll now move on to staff reports and other business, and there we have a continuing education update by Mr. Robert Lewis, our staff planner.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and the members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm happy to say that y'all have gotten all your credits for this year, and you can take the rest of the year off. We'll start again next January, where we'll probably have lunch with the legal department and have those classes every first Tuesday or so of the month during the year, and that'll enable a lot of the board members and staff members to get their hours at a relatively painless way of doing it.
Yeah.
So congratulations to y'all, and I'll just have to get the staff members to get caught up.
I'm already caught up. Don't look at me. No, and even though you all have all of your hours, we do have an interesting and very pertinent topic coming up at our December legal teleconference, which is on variances. And Robert, do you have the date of that teleconference?
I don't, but I think it's probably the first Tuesday of the month. It usually is. I don't have it with me right now.
We'll email y'all, and even if you have all of your hours, which all of you do, it still would be would not be a bad idea to come and listen.
See, the 1 year I don't procrastinate, now there's something relevant here. The way it always goes.
We would be delighted to have any and all of you at that meeting to have a sandwich with us and hear that presentation.
All right.
That's all I have.
At the risk of being overly prepared, my calendar shows that for the 13th of December, the BZA teleconference. I'm not sure why it's on my calendar. I think I had it put on when the list came out, but that's what I'm showing it. We can get carryover for that, right? If we have time, we can carry
I'd
over.
like to say yes, but
Yeah,
I got
you. Okay.
I'll find out the exact date, and I'll send y'all a confirmation email.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. We appreciate the update and appreciate you scheduling those for us. All right. Any other reports, other business?
Just one reminder, our December meeting will be on Monday, December 19th, because of the holiday season. So Monday, December 19th at 1 p.m.
All right. Anything else? Then we're adjourned.